They say private schools are where the next generation of leaders is born, where privilege and power mingle with potential. But no one tells you what it's like to walk those halls when you don't fit the mold, when you don't come from money, when your skin color makes you a target long before your report card ever could. And on the first day of fall semester at Middleton Academy, one of the most prestigious prep schools in the state, that truth was about to slap everyone in the face. Especially him, Cameron Hawthorne. Son of real estate tycoon Grant Hawthorne, heir to a multi-million-dollar fortune, and walking embodiment of spoiled entitlement. The kind of kid who'd never been told no, never earned anything, and never thought twice about who he stepped on to feel big. And then there was Zaria Ellis. Bright-eyed, soft-spoken, scholarship student. Her mom raised her alone for most of her life. They lived in a modest townhouse 2 bus rides away from Middleton. Zaria didn't wear Gucci or drive up in a Tesla. She showed up with second-hand books and a quiet confidence that made Cameron itch. Because no matter how hard he tried to rattle her, she wouldn't break. And that drove him crazy. "Yo, where's your driver, Alice?" Cameron sneered on day one, loud enough for the whole cafeteria to hear. "Oh right, you probably took the bus here with all the other poor people." Laughter exploded from his little posse. Zaria didn't flinch. She looked up from her lunch and said calmly, "At least I didn't need my daddy to pay someone to take my entrance exam." A few students gasped. Even Cameron's crew looked around nervously. Cameron leaned in, his smirk now a glare. "Watch your mouth. You don't belong here." Zaria packed up her tray and stood tall and composed. "Then why did I earn the top score on the admissions test?" More murmurs. More eyes shifting. But she walked away graceful. Untouched. And Cameron? He seethed. That afternoon he hatched a plan. By day 2 he'd already circulated a photoshopped image of Zaria scrubbing toilets, labeling her student janitor of the month. He printed fake cleaning schedules and stuck them to her locker. When she entered the classroom, the words "Maid Academy" were scrawled across the whiteboard. And still, Zaria said nothing. But every night she stayed late, studying harder, watching lectures on her phone under flickering hallway lights. She kept her head down, her GPA up, and her dreams alive. But Middleton wasn't just cruel, it was a stage. And on the week of the big Future Leaders debate, an event that drew state senators, tech CEOs, and even national news coverage, Zaria's quiet world was about to erupt. Because the topic for the final debate? Inherited wealth versus earned success. And the finalists? Cameron Hawthorne and Zaria Ellis. He laughed when he saw the pairing. What, they need a charity case to make it look fair? His friends laughed, but even the teachers looked uneasy. Zaria didn't blink. She prepared. Days turned into nights. She pored over books, wrote arguments, practiced in front of her bedroom mirror. Her mother, Cassandra, cheered her on every step of the way. But then, 2 days before the debate, Zaria came home to find their front door kicked in. Her laptop. Gone. Her notes? Shredded. No signs of forced entry. No real help from the police. She had nothing. And Cameron? The next morning, he smirked from across the hallway and whispered, "Guess your ghetto side caught up with you." That was it. Zaria didn't cry. Didn't yell. She pulled out a fresh notebook. Started over. And then, something shifted. The morning of the debate, a black SUV pulled into the Middleton parking lot. Clean. Polished. Federal tags. Security stepped out, scanning the perimeter. Students and staff paused, murmurs rippling through the courtyard. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit, polished shoes, sunglasses. Broad shoulders. Sharp presence. He walked with purpose. Right through the lobby. Right into the auditorium. Cameron's smirk faded when he saw him. Because suddenly, everyone's eyes weren't on him anymore. They were on Zaria, who stood at the podium with that same quiet poise. Calm. Unshaken. And now, backed by something none of them expected. Cameron leaned over to one of his friends. "Who the hell is that guy?" His friend squinted, jaw-dropping. "Bro. I think that's, wait, is that?" But the announcer interrupted. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, we'd like to welcome a very special guest joining us today in support of one of our debaters." The man stepped forward, removed his sunglasses. The room fell silent. Because standing before them was none other than General Isaac Ellis, high-ranking Pentagon official, retired 4-star general, national hero. Zaria's father. Cameron choked. Zarya straightened her mic and said softly, "You were right, Cameron. I'm not like you. I don't need to be. Because I know exactly who I am." The moment General Isaac Ellis walked into Middleton Academy, the atmosphere shifted. It was like the entire school froze in time. Teachers stood a little straighter. Parents sat up taller. Cameramen from the local press adjusted their lenses like they'd just seen a ghost. Because General Ellis wasn't just anybody. He was the General Ellis, decorated war hero, former Joint Chiefs advisor, and the man who'd once led a high-level mission that made national headlines. He wasn't just powerful, he was untouchable. And Zarya? She just smiled. She didn't need to explain herself anymore. The debate began and Cameron tried to recover. He still had that smug little chuckle, but now it sounded more nervous than arrogant. His voice cracked as he opened with lines about earned opportunity and legacy building. But the audience was restless. People were watching Zarya. And when it was her turn to speak, she didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She told the story of her mother, Cassandra, who worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, who never missed a parent-teacher conference, who stayed up at night making flashcards so her daughter could thrive. She told the story of watching her father leave for active duty when she was 7, never knowing if he'd come back. She told the story of earning her spot in that school, in that room, on that stage, without a silver spoon or a safety net. And when she ended with the words, "Success isn't about who hands you the key, it's about who has the courage to build the door," the auditorium erupted in applause. Cameron didn't clap. He stormed off the stage like a child who just got told no for the first time in his life. The judges? They didn't even deliberate long. Unanimous win, Zarya Ellis. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was in the look of pride on General Ellis's face. The way he stood beside his daughter, hand on her shoulder as the press swarmed them. Cameron watched from the hallway, fuming. He thought this whole thing was over. He was wrong. The next morning things got worse. Way worse. Cameron's dad, Grant Hawthorne, called the headmaster. Demanded a formal complaint be filed against Zarya for bringing politics into the debate. Said she had weaponized her family background. It was absurd. But when your last name's on the library wing, people listen. Suddenly, Zarya was called into the dean's office. Told her speech had been controversial. Told there were concerns about her conduct. And just like that, the tables tilted again. Only this time, Cameron wasn't satisfied with embarrassment. He wanted Zarya gone. So he dug deeper. Found an old video clip from a protest Zarya's mom had attended years ago. Peaceful but loud. He spliced it up to look more radical than it was and sent it anonymously to the school board. He started a whisper campaign. Her family's too political. They're just here for attention. She doesn't belong at Middleton. Soon students started pulling back. Teachers gave her colder looks. The hallway that once felt like hers now felt hostile. But the final straw? Zarya received a letter in her locker. No name. Just one sentence printed in bold. "You don't belong here and you never will." She didn't tell her father. Didn't want to distract him from his diplomatic work. But inside, she was cracking. Until one day, walking home alone, she was followed. A dark SUV trailed her from the school gate, turning every time she did. Her phone battery was dead. Her heart raced. She ducked into a corner store, breathing fast, pretending to browse. The SUV parked. A man stepped out. Not a school parent. Not a student. Not even from the neighborhood. He wore a dark hat. Earpiece. Government issue. He approached slowly, then handed her a card. Read. Confidential. Office of National Security. Zarya blinked. The man leaned down and whispered something that sent chills down her spine. "Miss Ellis, you and your father are being watched. And it's coming from inside the school." Zarya stood frozen on the sidewalk, clutching the card with trembling fingers. Office of National Security? Her mind raced, her thoughts spiraling. Why would someone like her, just a high school senior, be approached by a government agent? What did they mean? "You and your father are being watched?" That night she didn't sleep. Not a second. She waited until the house was quiet, her mother already asleep, and stepped into her father's home office. The smell of old books, leather, and strategy maps lingered in the air. She opened his file cabinet, carefully, respectfully, looking for anything that might explain the man's warning. And there, tucked inside a brown envelope, was something strange. A dossier. Labeled, Project Templar, Middleton Facility Oversight. Middleton Facility? Was that the school? Flipping through the documents, her eyes widened. There were surveillance reports, government correspondences, notes with redacted lines, photos of students, some she recognized, others she didn't, and her father's name stamped on the corner as Advisor on Security Protocol. Her breath caught. What was her father involved in? She needed answers. The next morning before school, Zarya confronted him. "Dad, what is Project Templar?" General Ellis's jaw clenched. He didn't ask how she found it. He just sat down slowly. "Zarya? Middleton isn't just a school. It's a test site." She blinked. "A test site for what?" He hesitated. "For future leaders. For watching legacy students. For monitoring influence." She stared at him, stunned. "Some of these kids aren't here because of grades," he continued. "They're here because their parents are investors, politicians, lobbyists. Middleton has been a hub for elite grooming for decades. And someone's been tracking their activities, and yours." Zarya's head swam. "Wait, so you knew?" "I tried to protect you from it," he said quietly. "But it seems someone doesn't want you here." Later that day at school the tension was worse. She felt the stares, the whispers. Her locker was trashed, papers torn, notebooks soaked. On the wall above it, someone had spray painted in red, "You were never one of us." She cleaned it in silence. But inside, a storm brewed. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to break. She was going to fight. And then, something unexpected happened. A new student was introduced in class. A quiet black boy with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. His name was Marcus Hill. No one had seen him before. He sat next to Zarya at lunch and leaned in. "I know what's happening here," he whispered. "I was sent to watch too. You're not alone." That night they met in secret at the city library. Marcus showed her his credentials. He was part of a shadow scholarship program for gifted minority students, created as a counterbalance to the legacy network dominating Middleton. But most importantly, he said, "I found something buried in the school system. Something you need to see." Zarya leaned in. He pulled out a tablet, and on the screen was a hidden file labeled Initiative, Legacy Protocol 9. She opened it, and her heart dropped. There, in black and white, were the names of students, marked as priority. And next to their names, notes like influence grooming, asset control, and leadership trajectory. But what chilled her to the bone was the last name on the list. Zarya Ellis, status, red flag. To be neutralized. Zarya couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her name, Zarya Ellis, bold and unmissable at the bottom of the list. Right next to it, status, red flag. To be neutralized. Her throat dried up. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the rest of the document. Notes had been written beside her academic achievements, her public speaking wins, and even her personal life. Highly intelligent. Charismatic. Could disrupt legacy influence. One line at the very bottom hit her like a brick. Daughter of General Isaac Ellis, unpredictable variable. Suddenly her whole world shifted. This wasn't just about a jealous rich kid mocking her. It wasn't even about class, race, or bullying anymore. It was bigger. She had been profiled, targeted, studied like some kind of threat to their system of power. And worst of all, Middleton Academy was in on it. She looked at Marcus, who sat across from her at the table in the quiet corner of the city library. He nodded slowly. "I've seen things like this before," he said. "Legacy schools across the country. Some of them run secret programs like this, screening students who don't come from wealth, trying to decide whether they can be absorbed or whether they need to be eliminated." Zarya blinked. "Eliminated? You mean?" "Not killed," Marcus said quickly, "but silenced. Dismissed, discredited, blacklisted before college apps go out. Labeled troublemakers. It's subtle, systemic, and cruel." Zarya felt something bubbling in her chest. Rage, fear, defiance. All of it. They wanted to write her out before her story even began. She wasn't just a student to them. She was a problem. And problems get handled. But Zarya had no intention of being handled. "I'm not going anywhere," she said quietly. Over the next week, she and Marcus launched their plan. Carefully, silently. Zarya started documenting everything. Whispers in the halls, strange meetings behind locked classroom doors, unexplained grades being changed for certain students. Marcus used a secure connection to copy files from the school's servers onto a hidden drive. Names, payments, parent-donor connections, patterns of preferential treatment. The more they uncovered, the darker the truth became. Turns out, the school wasn't just protecting its wealthiest students, it was actively helping some of them cheat, cover up scandals, and even erase disciplinary actions. One file revealed Cameron Hawthorne had been caught last year for bullying a student so severely the child had to transfer schools. But that record? What? His father had donated $250,000 the very next week. When Zarya read that, something inside her snapped. She uploaded a heavily redacted version of the report to an anonymous student-run blog and titled it, "The Price of Privilege at Middleton Academy." It spread like wildfire. By lunch, students were whispering. By evening, local reporters were emailing. By the next morning, the school board had called an emergency meeting. But none of it stopped the threats. Zarya began receiving anonymous texts. "Take it down. You're making a mistake. Your father can't protect you forever." One night, she came home to find their mailbox ripped off its hinges. A single note inside read, "Stop digging or you'll end up like the last one." Marcus didn't sleep that night. He called Zarya the next morning, his voice cold and tight. "Zarya, I found something. There was another student. Before you. A girl named Amaya Freeman. Top of her class. Bright. Bull. She started asking questions just like you." Zarya felt her stomach drop. "What happened to her?" "She was expelled," Marcus said. "Officially? Cheating. But it was fake. I found her old blog, buried, deleted, almost wiped. But there's something else. Right before her expulsion, she tried to leak everything she'd found to someone on the outside. A reporter." Zarya's heart pounded. "Did the reporter ever publish it?" Marcus paused. "No. The reporter went missing 2 weeks later." Zarya gasped. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying we're not just exposing corruption. We're stepping into a hornet's nest. And there are powerful people who'd do anything to protect this system." Still, Zarya didn't back down. That Friday, the school held an emergency assembly. Headmaster Whitmore stood on stage with his usual polished smile. "We want to remind our student body that false allegations are dangerous and will be met with serious consequences," he said. His eyes flicked toward Zarya. Very serious. But Zarya stood up. Right there, in front of the entire auditorium, she raised her hand. "I have a question," she said boldly. The room went silent. "Yes, Miss Ellis?" Whitmore said, his voice sharp. Zarya held up her phone. "If everything we're saying is false, then why do I have copies of every transaction, every grade adjustment, and every time the school silenced a victim of bullying, including the one involving Cameron Hawthorne?" Gasps filled the room. Whitmore's face turned pale. But then Cameron stood up. And this time he wasn't sneering. He looked panicked. "Zarya, don't," he shouted. "You don't know what you're messing with. You don't know who's behind all this." Zarya raised her eyebrows. "Then tell us, who's behind it?" And in that moment, Cameron did something no one expected. He looked straight at the school board, at his own father, and said, "Ask my dad. He's the one who built this system." The auditorium erupted into chaos. Teachers stood frozen, mouths agape. Students looked at each other in shock. And in the front row, members of the school board shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Cameron's father, Jonathan Hawthorne, the most powerful man on the board, rose slowly, his face a mask of fury. "Cameron, sit down," he hissed through clenched teeth. But Cameron didn't sit. He turned to face the entire school, trembling but determined. "You all think this school is about excellence, about achievement," he said, voice cracking. "But it's not. It's about control, power, image." Zarya stared at him, unsure whether this was guilt or a desperate attempt to save himself. "They blacklisted students like Zarya because they were afraid someone smart and unbought would expose everything," Cameron continued. "They cover for kids like me because our parents write checks with more zeros than morals." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Zarya felt her legs shake beneath her. Was this really happening? The golden boy of Middleton was exposing the very system that built him? Headmaster Whitmore stepped forward, trying to regain control. "This assembly is over. Return to your classes immediately. But no one moved. Zarya stepped toward the stage, her voice strong and unshaken. No, it's just beginning. That night, Zarya uploaded a new video to the student blog, this time featuring Cameron's full confession, audio files from inside faculty meetings, and bank statements showing illegal donations in exchange for legacy admissions. Within hours, it went viral beyond the school. News outlets picked up the story. Parents began pulling their children from Middleton. Investigators started circling. But with attention came danger. Marcus noticed a black SUV parked near his street 2 nights in a row. Zarya received an email with no text, just a picture of her walking to class circled in red. And then there was the letter. It arrived at her doorstep, no return address. Inside was a single page. Stop, or your father's classified history becomes public. Zarya's fingers went numb. She stared at the paper, then at her mom who had just walked in. Mom, what history are they talking about? Her mother froze. It was the first time Zarya saw fear in her eyes. Your father? She whispered. Before the military, before politics, he worked for a program. A classified one. He signed papers that bound him for life. If anything leaked, it wouldn't just ruin him. It could get him arrested. Zarya's head spun. Why didn't he ever tell me? He was trying to protect you. That night, her father came into her room. No military sharpness, no cold command. Just a father with pain behind his eyes. I didn't want you dragged into this, baby girl. But I knew one day the fight would come to you. Zarya's voice cracked. What did they mean in the letter? What is it they're trying to use against you? He looked away. Something I built. Years ago. A surveillance system, originally meant to monitor national security threats. But after I left, private hands got involved. They started using it for other purposes. Tracking activists, student leaders, people like you. Zarya's stomach turned. You mean they've been watching me, for years? I only found out after your name came up in an old alert file. That's when I started pulling strings to get you into Middleton. I thought if you were inside you could beat them at their own game. Zarya couldn't believe what she was hearing. All this time she thought she'd earned her way into the school purely on merit. But her father had placed her there, like a pawn in a war she never knew existed. I don't want to be a pawn, she said, her voice shaking. Her father looked her in the eye. Then become the queen. The next morning, Zarya walked into school with her head held high. Students whispered. Cameras followed. But she didn't care. She walked into Headmaster Whitmore's office, placed a flash drive on his desk and said, This has everything. Emails. Phone records. Your offshore account in the Caymans. I'm giving you 24 hours to resign and make a public apology, or I go national. Whitmore's face went white. You'll regret this. We'll bury your father. We'll bury you. Zarya didn't flinch. I've already been buried. Now I'm the storm coming to dig up you. By noon, whispers turned into headlines. Whitmore was spotted leaving the school in a hurry. The board scheduled an emergency vote. Cameron Hawthorne was placed on temporary suspension. But that night something terrifying happened. Zarya's father didn't come home. His phone rang twice and went straight to voicemail. An unmarked envelope was slid under their door. Inside was a photo, blurry but unmistakable. Her father. Hands zip-tied. Sitting in the back of what looked like a black van. Underneath it, a note in red marker. You went too far. Your father pays the price. Zarya stared at the photo of her father in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, the words beneath it burning into her mind. You went too far. Your father pays the price. She knew this wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. Her mother tried to remain calm, but Zarya could see the panic in her eyes. They'd lived through military deployments, death threats, media slander. But this was different. This was personal and silent and cruel. Zarya didn't wait. She ran to her room, yanked open the false bottom in her desk drawer, and pulled out the backup hard drive her father told her to keep, just in case. It held everything, every document, every confidential communication, even files Zarya had never opened before. She scrolled past the school board blackmail folder, past the photos of illegal fund transfers from Jonathan Hawthorne's firm, and landed on something labeled Opie Delta, Shadow Hands. She clicked. It was encrypted. But Zarya knew the passphrase. Her dad used it for everything. A combination of her birth date and a Swahili phrase he used to whisper to her when she was scared, Usiogope, Mtoto wangu. Don't be afraid, my child. The screen blinked and then it opened. Hundreds of names. Politicians, judges, principals, CEOs. And a name that made Zaria's heart stop. Dr. Elizabeth Fairchild. The same woman who'd come to Middleton as a guest speaker last semester. The same woman who shook Zaria's hand and whispered, "You remind me of someone brave I once knew." She was listed as high-level coordinator, Psychological Asset Control Division. Zaria's father wasn't just fighting corruption. He was fighting a hidden faction using elite schools to groom future operatives, children of influence, trained to obey without question, to become weapons in suits. Middleton wasn't an ordinary prep school. It was a front. Zaria ran the search function and typed current locations. A map loaded. Multiple red dots appeared, but one glowed in Central Virginia labeled Site Echo, Containment and Processing. She zoomed in and gasped. It was 20 minutes from her house. A decommissioned underground military bunker. She knew what she had to do. She called Marcus. "Meet me at the 711 near Pine Hollow. Bring the drone, the cameras, and we're something you can run in." They met in silence. The sun had barely risen. Marcus didn't even ask questions. He'd seen the files. He knew what was at stake. They drove through the winding back roads until they reached a fenced-off property, overgrown with brush, hidden from the main road. A rusty government sign hung crooked on the fence. Authorized personnel only, former communications hub. Zaria knelt by the fence, pulled out a bolt cutter from her bag and snapped the lock. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked, eyes wide. "We find my dad," she whispered. "And we bring the whole system down." They crept inside, following a trail of disturbed leaves and faint tire tracks. Soon they reached a steel hatch covered in moss. Zaria tugged it open. A cold gust of air whooshed up. She looked at Marcus. "You sure?" He nodded. "Always." They descended the metal ladder into darkness. The deeper they went, the more the sounds of the outside world faded. Finally they landed on concrete. A long hallway stretched in front of them, dimly lit with flickering lights. As they moved forward, the walls changed, from bare concrete to high-tech panels, sensors, and cameras. This place was still operational. They passed rooms filled with surveillance monitors showing live feeds from classrooms across the country. "Middleton isn't the only one," Marcus whispered. They reached a locked door labeled Security Holding, C3. Zaria tapped into the security panel using the override her father had taught her. The door slid open. And there he was. Her father. Shackled. Bruised but alive. "Dad." "Zaria?" She ran to him, threw her arms around him. He looked at her with disbelief. "How did you find me?" "I followed the truth," she whispered. But before they could finish, the alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Intruder detected. Lockdown initiated. Doors slammed shut all around them. A voice echoed over the intercom. "You shouldn't have come here, Zaria." It was Dr. Fairchild. "Your father made his choice. But now you've made yours. And there's no going back." Zaria's breath caught. Fairchild's voice turned colder. "Let me show you what your father never told you about the program, about you, and what you were really born to do." The cold, metallic voice of Dr. Elizabeth Fairchild echoed off the walls of the underground bunker, her words dripping with sinister certainty. "Let me show you what your father never told you about the program, about you, and what you were really born to do." Zaria's breath caught in her throat as her fingers hovered over the control panel. Behind her, her father, still chained and weak, shook his head slowly, silently pleading with her not to engage. But it was too late. The wall in front of them flickered, revealing a hidden screen. It lit up with a grainy video feed. A hospital room. A newborn baby. Zaria's mother lying in a bed, exhausted. And a man in a military uniform, not her father, holding a clipboard and whispering to a young Dr. Fairchild, "She's the one. DNA confirmed. Put her on Tier 1. Full conditioning will begin in Phase 2. Zaria staggered backward. "What is this?" she demanded. Fairchild's voice answered coolly, "You were never just a child, Zaria. You were selected. Monitored since birth. Your intellect, your empathy, your defiance, it was all part of the screening. You were always meant to be the keystone." Zarya turned to her father. Is this true? His eyes welled with tears. They wanted to mold you into a political weapon. The perfect face for their next-gen agenda. But I ran. I took you. I hid you in plain sight, raised you to be free. But I always knew, one day they'd come. Zarya felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Her entire life, a lie wrapped in love. So what now? She asked the screen. You expect me to what? Join you? Dr. Fairchild chuckled. No, Zarya. I expect you to understand that your resistance was expected. Built into the program. Even your rebellion is part of your design. Zarya clenched her fists. You're wrong about me. I'm not your weapon. I'm the one who's going to end this. Before Fairchild could respond, Zarya spun around to Marcus, who was now at the surveillance station. Can you upload everything to the cloud? Marcus nodded, sweat dripping down his face. I've got the files, the video feed, the metadata from the lab. All of it. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Armed guards. Dozens of them. Marcus, Zarya snapped, upload now. And lock this door behind us. She sprinted to her father and began unlocking his shackles. Dad, you have to move, can you walk? He winced but nodded. I'll crawl if I have to. The three of them fled down the alternate hallway as Marcus shouted, uploads at 62%. Go. I'll meet you at the extraction point. As they disappeared into the shadows, Zarya could hear Fairchild's voice once more, piped through every speaker in the compound. You think exposing us will change anything? These people don't care, Zarya. They'll just call it a conspiracy theory. They'll spin it. And by the time they're done with you, you'll be the villain. Zarya gritted her teeth and whispered, then I'll make sure the truth is too loud to ignore. They reached the emergency exit tunnel, one her father had installed when he briefly worked on this base years ago. As they emerged into the cold night air, choppers thundered overhead. But just as they crossed into the woods, an explosion rocked the compound behind them. Zarya turned and saw a fireball light up the sky. What the? And then Marcus's voice came through her earpiece, ragged but triumphant. I blew the core, took down their backup servers too. Everything's uploading to 47 independent sources across the world. The story's going to break before sunrise. Her father smiled weakly, tears in his eyes. You did it, baby girl. But Zarya wasn't smiling. She stared at the sky as helicopters scanned the forest. We're not out yet, she said. By morning it had begun. News stations were flooded with encrypted links to documents detailing illegal psychological grooming programs in elite schools. Photos of Dr. Fairchild with politicians, shady contracts from Hawthorne Industries, and footage of Zarya's rescue of her father from the underground bunker dominated headlines. At Middleton, parents pulled their children out in droves. Jonathan Hawthorne was placed under federal investigation for corporate corruption, and Dr. Fairchild vanished, gone underground, her location unknown. But in the aftermath, something else began to happen. Students who had been mocked, dismissed, or mistreated, especially black students, began stepping forward, telling their stories, demanding reform. Zarya had become a symbol, not because she was perfect, but because she fought even when the truth hurt. Months later, she stood on a stage at a national education summit. Cameras flashed. Crowds roared. She adjusted the mic. I was told my whole life that I was just a student, just a face in the crowd, just a black girl in a place where I didn't belong. But I've learned something they never wanted me to know. She paused. My history doesn't make me weak. It makes me powerful. And I will not be anyone's weapon. I will be the voice they tried to silence. The crowd erupted. And watching from a safe house, somewhere in a mountain cabin, Dr. Fairchild watched the broadcast on a cracked laptop. She narrowed her eyes, then typed a message on a secure terminal. Target compromised. Initiating phase 2. She hit send. Fire final line. This battle may be over, but the war has just begun.